We live in a world that glorifies the grind, celebrates sleepless nights, and applauds those who sacrifice everything for success. But what if I told you that working harder isn't always the answer? What if the secret to achieving more lies not in pushing yourself to exhaustion, but in pausing to refine your approach? Today's story will reveal a timeless truth that could transform the way you work forever. Stay with me until the end, because this might be exactly what you need to hear right now. In a small village nestled between rolling hills and dense woodlands, there lived a carpenter named David. He was known throughout the community as the most dedicated worker anyone had ever seen. Every single morning, while the sky was still draped in darkness, David would wake up, grab his tools, and head straight to his workshop. He barely touched his morning tea or spent time with his family. His mission was simple yet consuming: build more furniture than anyone else, finish more orders, prove his worth through sheer determination and endless hours of labor. David believed deeply in one philosophy: success belongs to those who outwork everyone else. So he poured every ounce of energy into his craft. Days blurred into nights, weeks melted into months. His hands grew calloused, his shoulders constantly ached, and dark circles settled permanently beneath his eyes. But he wore these signs of exhaustion like badges of honor. This is what dedication looks like, he would tell himself. However, something troubling began to happen. Despite working longer hours than ever before, despite skipping meals and rest, David noticed his productivity was declining. Projects that used to take him 3 days now stretched to 5. His saws moved slower through the wood. His hammer felt like it weighed twice as much. Mistakes became frequent. Customers started complaining about delays. The furniture that once gleamed with quality now looked rushed and uneven. Confusion turned to frustration, and frustration turned to desperation. David couldn't understand what was happening. "I'm working harder than I ever have," he would mutter to himself while struggling through another difficult cut. "Why am I falling behind?" the villagers began to whisper. David isn't what he used to be. Maybe age is catching up with him. Perhaps his skills are fading. These whispers cut deeper than any saw blade. Instead of stopping to reflect, David responded the only way he knew how: by working even harder, pushing even longer, refusing to show any sign of weakness. One sweltering afternoon, David was in his workshop trying to saw through a thick piece of oak. He pushed and pulled, sweat pouring down his face, but the blade barely made progress. The wood seemed to resist every stroke. Anger boiled over, and he threw down his saw in frustration. "Why won't anything work right anymore?" he shouted to the empty workshop. "I'm giving everything I have." Just then, an elderly craftsman named Thomas, who had recently moved to the village, appeared at the workshop entrance. He had been watching David struggle for several minutes. "Forgive my intrusion, young man," Thomas said calmly, "but you seem to be fighting a battle you cannot win." David looked up, exhausted and irritated. "I don't have time for conversations. I have 3 orders to complete by tomorrow, and I'm already behind schedule." Thomas stepped closer and picked up the saw David had thrown down. He ran his weathered finger along the blade and held it up to the light. "Tell me something, David. When was the last time you sharpened your tools?" David paused, genuinely confused by the question. "Sharpened them? I don't remember. Maybe months ago. I've been too busy actually using them to waste time on maintenance." Thomas smiled gently, a knowing look in his wise eyes. "My friend, you're not too busy to sharpen your tools. You're too busy because you haven't sharpened your tools." He set the saw down carefully. "A dull blade requires 3 times the effort for half the result. You're not losing your ability or your strength. You're simply working with equipment that can no longer serve you properly." David wanted to argue, but something in Thomas's words struck a chord deep within him. The old craftsman continued, "I've seen many talented workers burn themselves out. Not because they lacked skill or dedication, but because they confused motion with progress. They kept pushing harder with dull tools, worn-out methods, and exhausted bodies, wondering why success kept slipping further away." Thomas placed a gentle hand on David's shoulder. "True mastery isn't about working without rest. It's about knowing when to pause, sharpen your tools, and return stronger than before." After Thomas left, David stood alone in his workshop, surrounded by half-finished projects and blunt tools. For the first time in months, he truly looked at his situation. His saws were dull, his chisels were chipped, his workbench was disorganized, and he himself was running on empty. That evening, instead of forcing himself through more work, David did something revolutionary. He stopped. He went home early. He had dinner with his wife and children, really listening to their stories for the first time in weeks. He slept a full night's rest. And the next morning, before starting any new project, he spent 3 hours carefully sharpening every tool in his workshop. He organized his workspace. He planned his projects more efficiently. He took breaks to stretch and breathe. When David finally returned to work, something magical happened. The saw glided through wood like butter. The chisel carved precise, clean lines. His body moved with energy he had forgotten existed. That day, he completed more work in 6 focused hours than he had managed in 12 exhausted hours the day before. The furniture he created was beautiful, again, crafted with precision and care. David realized a profound truth. He had been so obsessed with the appearance of hard work that he had forgotten the purpose of work itself. Real productivity wasn't about hours logged or sweat shed. It was about effectiveness, preparation, and maintaining the tools, including himself, that made the work possible. From that day forward, David adopted a new approach. He started his mornings by checking and maintaining his tools. He scheduled regular breaks to rest his body and clear his mind. He invested time in learning new techniques that could make his work more efficient. He prioritized sleep, proper nutrition, and time with his family, understanding that these weren't distractions from success, they were foundations for it. The transformation was remarkable. David's business flourished beyond anything he had achieved through relentless grinding. His reputation grew not just for hard work, but for excellent work. Other craftsmen began seeking his advice, and he would always share the lesson Thomas taught him. Don't just work hard, work smart. Take care of your tools, your skills, your body, and your mind. The lesson here is universal and timeless. We live in a culture that glorifies exhaustion, that treats burnout as a badge of honor. But pushing yourself without pause, learning, or improvement isn't dedication. It's self-destruction. The axe becomes dull. The mind becomes foggy. The body breaks down. And the work that once brought joy becomes nothing but suffering. Sharpen your mind by investing in learning and growth. Sharpen your body through rest, exercise, and proper care. Sharpen your skills by practicing deliberately and seeking improvement. Sharpen your spirit through reflection, connection, and purpose. Don't wait until you're completely broken before you choose to grow. Don't let pride or fear of appearing weak prevent you from taking the necessary pauses that make real progress possible. Because here's the truth that David discovered and that we all must learn. Sometimes the fastest way to move forward is to stop for a moment and sharpen the tools that will take you there. Success doesn't belong to those who work themselves to death. It belongs to those wise enough to work themselves to life. So ask yourself today, are you working hard or are you working smart? Are your tools sharp? Is your mind clear? Is your body rested? Because the difference between exhaustion and excellence is often just one intentional pause away.